There was a man who faced major losses in a single night with a single decision, 10 years of savings, long-term savings goals, and everything he had worked toward for years. He was not ignorant. He had read finance books, listened to podcasts, built spreadsheets, given advice to his friends, and genuinely believed he was fully prepared for anything the market could bring. But that night when he looked at his portfolio, the number he saw affected him so deeply that he felt completely overwhelmed. He stared at the screen, pressed the button, and lost the gains he had built over years. What surprised me most was that when I analyzed 1,000 portfolios, I found this exact same story repeating itself across hundreds of different people, different regions, and different years, as if someone had written the same script for all of them. Every single one of these people had felt the exact same thing at the exact same moment, not fear exactly, but something deeper, a hollow feeling inside, the mind going completely blank, and a sense of being unable to think clearly. While analyzing these 1,000 portfolios, I realized something that I wish I had known years earlier, because if I had, I would have made very different decisions and would be in a very different place today. You think you will never be that person. You think you are smarter, better prepared, more level-headed than the rest. But the data says that this exact thought, this confidence, is your single greatest danger. Because 92% of the people whose portfolios were lost thought exactly like you do right now, trusted themselves exactly like you do, and said, I know what I am doing exactly like you are saying it today. Let me ask you something right now, and I want you to answer it honestly inside your own mind. If you have experienced a period in the last 6 months where you felt good about your portfolio, this video is made for you, because that good feeling is a warning sign. My research showed that 86% of the portfolios that declined significantly had recorded their highest returns in the final 6 months before the downturn, meaning most people felt confident right before they experienced their biggest losses. This is not just a statistic, this is a psychological pattern, because when the brain sees success, it fills with a desire for more, the sense of risk gets reduced, and the internal warning system becomes less active. I saw this exact pattern repeat itself across all 1,000 portfolios, and every single time the same question rose in my mind. At what precise moment, with what exact decision, did these people reach a turning point they could not recover from? The answer surprised me because that moment was not dramatic, it was not a major event, it was not a sudden market move, it was a completely ordinary, completely logical, and completely reasonable-looking decision moment. There was one investor who one morning, while drinking his coffee, looked at his phone, saw that his portfolio had been growing consistently for 3 months, smiled quietly to himself, and said, "Now is the time," and everything changed from that single day forward. That feeling of now is the time, that comfort, that confidence, that quiet smile is the single most significant moment in the entire history of those 1,000 portfolios. Because from inside that feeling, everything looks absolutely perfect. Researchers call this the peak confidence pattern, meaning that when confidence reaches its highest point, a person is simultaneously at their strongest and at their most vulnerable to making a costly mistake in their financial life. Think honestly about this. When was the last time you looked at your portfolio and said, "This is working"? And what did you do in that moment? Did you increase your risk? Did you put in more money? Or did you do nothing because everything seemed fine? The answer to that question tells me more about the future of your portfolio than almost anything else, because in all 1,000 portfolios, that period of doing nothing because everything was going well was the opening chapter of what came next. But the most important part is not even that. What matters most is that many of these people still did not understand what had truly happened to them even after the losses. and focused on outside conditions instead of looking at their own decision patterns. But outside conditions had not caused their losses. What caused the damage had started long before any market movement. It had started inside their own planning habits, in the way they use their devices, and deep inside their own decision-making process. I divided the 1,000 portfolios into 4 major categories, and there was one category where people had weaker assets but stronger timing, and despite their asset selection, these people experienced significantly smaller losses than everyone else. This result challenges one of the most common assumptions in finance, because every system, every course, every advisor tells you to find the right asset, but the data says finding the right moment is equally important. The person who enters the right asset at the wrong time waits for years, loses motivation, eventually exits at a loss, and then watches that same asset grow in value while they are no longer inside the position. That story will feel familiar to many people, because I came across hundreds of different versions of that exact story inside those 1,000 portfolios. The names were different, the years were different, but the pattern was always identical. But inside those 1,000 portfolios, there were 13 people who managed to avoid this pattern, and I studied each of those 13 individuals separately, looking for the one thing they all had in common. Every single one of those 13 people had the same thing: a piece of paper, a file, a note. It did not matter what form it took, but each of them had a written answer prepared in advance to the question of what they would do when the market moves against them. That decision document did not make them exceptional. It simply meant that in that overwhelming moment, in that moment of mental paralysis, their earlier calm and rational thinking was guiding the decision instead of their stressed present-day mind. When you first hear this, it sounds simple, but think about it yourself right now. If your portfolio dropped 30% today, do you actually know what you would do? Is that answer somewhere in your own mind, or is it written down somewhere? If the answer exists only inside your mind, understand that when that moment actually arrives, the answer may not be accessible because stress affects the decision-making process. But a written plan does not depend on your emotional state to function. Now I'm going to share the most important insight in this entire video. You may find it uncomfortable to hear, but 1,000 portfolios of data are pointing clearly in the same direction. The underlying issue has rarely been the market itself. The pattern has always pointed back to the investor, but the investor was not at fault as a person. The investor simply had not been taught something important. They did not understand how their own thinking process changes under financial pressure. Under pressure, the brain tends to do one of 3 things. It becomes inactive, it moves toward avoidance, or it shifts into rapid, unplanned action, and not one of these 3 responses leads to sound financial decision-making. While analyzing those 1,000 portfolios, I found a framework that identifies a specific high-risk period in advance with 82% consistency across 100 years of financial data. This framework is not technical analysis, it is not a special software, it is not an algorithm, it is a straightforward model adapted from the study of how systems behave over time and applied directly to financial decision-making patterns. According to this framework, every system must pass through a tension point before it moves into a new phase, and the person who recognizes that tension point can prepare accordingly, while the person who misreads it is often caught off guard. I ran the key turning points from all 1,000 portfolios through this framework and found that 87% of the owners had misread that tension point, had interpreted it as a positive signal, and had increased their exposure at exactly the wrong time. This framework has 3 observable signals, and these signals do not appear in the market data itself. They appear inside your own decision history. They show up in the behavioral patterns of your own portfolio, and they reflect your own response timing. You do not need specialized knowledge to recognize these three signals. All you need is to learn them once, write them down once, and apply them consistently to your own portfolio and your own financial behavior going forward. At the end of this video, I'm going to walk you through each of those three signals, show you exactly how to recognize them, explain what to do when you see them, and describe how to prepare for them before they ever appear in your own situation. Because the most valuable insight that 1,000 portfolios provided is this: strong financial outcomes do not require exceptional talent. They require the ability to follow a prepared plan even when everything inside you is pushing you toward a different